Imagine dawn breaking over a seam of pewter water. Long ships bobbing at anchor like bronze-scaled serpents, and coastal villagers bolting their doors, not for fear of fleeting raids, but of a Norse flag that now hangs permanent above their harbour. Welcome to a 10th century Europe, where the Vikings never ceased to roam, never fractured into petty jarldoms, and never surrendered the sea. Tonight, we open the logbook of an empire forged by ore and winter star, one that will rewrite the map before the first crusader ever dons mail. Hail, seekers of untold timelines. Step onto the creaking deck of our story ship. No horned helmets required, but sharp curiosity is mandatory. Find your sea legs quickly. These waters change history's tides every time the wind shifts. If charting alternate seas of the past thrills you, lash down that subscribe rune and strike the notification gong so you never miss a voyage. Shout your hometown in the comments like a beacon fire on the coast. Let's stitch a network of waypoints across the modern world. Stay aboard, because before this part ends, we'll watch a pagan council draft trade law that outlives Charlemagne. See a single mint in gelling flood Europe with silver coins stamped by Odin's raven, and witness the birth of Vinland, not as a forgotten camp, but as a frost-ringed capital of the North Atlantic. The shockwave that topples Rome's heirs arrives in later chapters, but for now, grab the rail and feel the keel bite the waves. Our long night at sea begins. In our world, Viking activity peaks between 850 and 1050, then ebbs as Christian monarchies rise, silver supplies dwindle, and coastal defences sharpen. Normandy is granted to a Norse duke who becomes French. Dublin's Norse Gaels fade into history. Greenland's colonies vanish. Those reversals are the tide we reverse tonight. A kingdom forged in salt and oath. Rather than splintering after Harald Bluetooth, the Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish Jarls convene at Ribe in 989 to settle blood feuds under a single law speaker. The event, known to later sagas as the Great Moot, codifies Vikingrat, the Viking Commonwealth. Key provisions: no raiding member coastlines, disputes adjudicated by ring gift fines, not axes. Every longship owes one season to the communal fleet. With feuds damned, energy turns outward. Silver from the eastern trade routes, once hemorrhaging into local treasuries, is pooled in gelling where master smiths strike a standardized coin, the sea penny. Alloyed with trace copper for durability and stamped with a raven in flight, the sea penny travels faster than any missionary. Frankish merchants, starved of reliable bullion after Ottonian wars, accepted by necessity. By 1002, Aachen market records show 30% of transactions settled in northern coin. The Baltic Shield, a unified fleet, means Baltic piracy becomes state policy. Blockades tighten around the Dvina and Neva rivers, taxing fur caravans bound for Constantinople. Instead of attacking Kiev, Norse traders established protected posts, Verdskjold, where Varangian guards escort Slavic merchants west in exchange for a tariff payable in sable pelts. This cordon of oaths stabilizes the overland fur route and shifts eastern revenue away from Byzantium into northern coffers. Christian missionaries find doors ajar, but minds steel barred. The Commonwealth adopts a pragmatic syncretism. Christ may sit at the long-haul table, but only as guest to Thor and Frey. Latin clerks, hungry for parchment, are tolerated and taxed. In return, they teach runecasters how to keep accounts on calfskin. Literacy spreads, though scripture is recast as saga. Ring forts to stone harbours, defence shifts from circular turf forts to stone quays capable of winter docking. Architects inspired by Irish monasteries design ice piers cut with sluice channels. brackish currents undermelt hulls, preventing freeze-in. The capital at Jelling funds copycat harbours from Trondheim to Hedeby, each doubling as customs posts. Harbour rolls list foreign captains by rune tag, ensuring tribute flows to the thing. Archaeologists centuries later will misread these structures as monastic outworks, unaware they served the ship churches of Odin. Commerce in the Whale Road. The newly ordered fleets turn west. Unlike the fragile Vinland sites of real history, our Norse settlers carry iron ploughs, loom weights, and barrel staves, signalling intent to stay. They choose the Gulf of St. Lawrence for its timber and ice-free bay, naming the settlement Ny Stadhofen, new anchorage. Seal fats fuel lamps, while salmon rivers feed a population that swells with every summer convoy. Indigenous Mi'kmaq councils negotiate seasonal hunting corridors, exchanging beaver pelts for whale oil and wrought iron tools. Relations remain cautious but symbiotic. The Norse Commonwealth decrees blood oaths forbidding enslavement of local peoples on penalty of outlawry across the entire North Sea ring. Wood-paved streets and turf-walled longhouses rise along fjord-like inlets. Climate data proxies indicate a mild medieval warm period. Grapevines stretch farther north, allowing settlers to ferment haflin, sea wine. Vats of purple ferment simmer under sealskin tents, their fumes warding mosquitoes. By 1030, Ny Stadhofen dispatches annual cargoes of pelts, timber and wine to Iceland in clinker-built cogs, larger and beamier than the old longship. Prototypes of North Atlantic cargo haulers, Eurasian shockwaves. Frankish chroniclers view the Viking Union with alarm. The East Frankish king Henry the Quarrelsome launches a Rhine fleet to disrupt sea penny inflow, but the Commonwealth responds with the Night Scream. Squadrons of shallow draft ships strike signal beacons up the Frisian coast, then vanish, forcing the king to garrison every inlet at ruinous cost. In England, Ethelred's officers, unable to buy peace with Danegeld, sea penny outbid sterling, try forging an alliance with Normandy. Yet Normandy's Duke Richard II faces his own rebellion as Norse merchants in Rouen, empowered by the Commonwealth Navy offshore, demand exemptions from Frankish tolls. Tension fractures the Duke's loyalty, opening a Norman backdoor for Commonwealth diplomacy. Thus, by the century's turn, an unbroken ring of influence stretches from Vinland to Novgorod, tied by coin, oath, and the black-ribbed hulls that haunt southern dreams. 3 decades of unity transform the Norse from scattershot raiders into oceanic architects. A standardized currency underwrites trade, ring forts evolve into harbors, and Vinland stands not as myth, but as Atlantic keystone. Europe senses the coming storm, yet tightens its own rivets. Castles rise higher, crossbows lengthen draw, and cathedrals pray louder. The wheel of fate creaks forward, and in the next part we will witness how monasteries fortify libraries against Norse paper hunger, how Byzantine silk becomes a northern bargaining chip, and why a single winter blizzard nearly unravels the Commonwealth's grand design. The parchment of winter, once merely a blank space on medieval calendars, turns blood-inked in the year 1012. A blizzard roars out of the Norwegian Sea and slams every harbour from Trondheim to Hedeby, beneath drifts taller than a longship's prow. Frozen surf rears like hammered bronze, trapping hulls in plate-glass coffins. Even the Commonwealth's famed ice piers groan and splinter, and for the first time since the Great Moot, the unified Jarls confront a threat they cannot cleave with steel. Winter siege bylaw scribes in Jelling declare an emergency levy. Every coastal thing must supply sleds, seal oil torches, and oatcake rations for starvation patrols, tasked with hauling supplies between snow-entombed farms. Monks of St. Cuthbert, exiled decades earlier, seized the chance to earn favour. Their stone monasteries stand stout against the squall. They open granaries under armed guard, distributing barley mash in exchange for promises that the Commonwealth will protect monastic scriptoria from future raids. Thus begins an unlikely barter: food for ink. The Scrivener's Fortress. Across Europe, scribes have always feared Norse flames, yet now they sense a trade wind. In York's Minster Yard, Benedictine abbot Elfric drafts a letter offering the library's unrivaled collection of Latin codices as leverage. Grant the abbey immunity, and the Vikings may copy any manuscript. The Commonwealth replies with a gilded rune staff, symbolizing oath bond, and dispatches 3 rune carvers who arrive carrying blank vellum and iron gall ink. For 2 winters, the long hall in York resounds not with axes, but with the scratch of quills as sagas and psalters cross-pollinate. Literacy expands through the northern coast. Norse captains memorize Psalm 23 alongside stanzas of the Havamal, reciting both before setting sail. Silk along the Frost Road. At the same time, Byzantine silk, normally routed through Kiev to Constantinople, redirects north. Commonwealth envoys, backed by Varangian guards fluent in Greek and Old Norse, broker a treaty with Novgorod. River tolls halved in exchange for naval escorts protecting Divina convoys from steppe raiders. Crimson bolts of Byzantine silk reach Hedeby, just as the blizzard breaks. The vivid fabric becomes the new coin of prestige. Jarls drape throne cushions in peacock blue shot with gold weft, while Frankish counts mutter that the north has stolen the east's thunder. The influx of silk spurs a proto-industry in Rib, where tailors experiment with blending seal sinew and wool to mimic the sheen. Unwittingly, they invent a water-resistant gabardine ideal for sails. Next season, experimental high-aspect silk rigs appear on longships. Linen undersails reinforced with gabardine panels catch winter's meagre breeze, giving Norse ships a speed edge against heavier Frankish cogs. Vinland's winter gift news of the Homefjords crisis reaches Nystadhofen the following summer. Vinland's assembly responds by felling spruce forest to build box-keel transports, wide-beam carriers capable of bearing twice the grain of a standard gnar. They pack holds with dried salmon, rendered whale oil, and kegs of halfvin. The voyage east in autumn storms pushes seamanship limits, yet 3 of the 4 grain ships reach Iceland before Yule. Their arrival staves off famine and cements Vinland's status as co-equal realm, not colonial appendage. The pen surpasses the axe. As spring thaws the North Sea, Jarls gather at Jelling to debate a haunting revelation. Swords could not cut the blizzard, but ink, grain, and silk did. They draft the Edict of Snowmelt, stipulating that 1 out of every 20 warriors must train as scrivener, harbour engineer, or convoy quartermaster. The age of pure raider prestige ends. Knowledge and logistics become the new runes of power. Frankish ripples. Frankish chroniclers once mocked Norse as pagan rustics. Now they confront a literate, winter-proof commonwealth. Monasteries in Tours respond by circling cloisters with timber palisades and stockpiling Greek medical texts to barter for future Norse grain. Merchants petition King Robert II for silk import tariffs, but the Crown, desperate for sea pennies, keeps duties low, exacerbating domestic unrest. Silk banner over Chartres. In a symbolic coup, Commonwealth envoys present the Bishop of Chartres a bolt of raven black silk embroidered with a silver cross and twin ravens. The bishop, under pressure from famine-stricken peasants, blesses it publicly, acknowledging Norse aid. For the first time, a Christian altar cloth bears a pagan emblem. Papal envoys protest, but the silk remains. By 1018, the north emerges from catastrophe stronger. Harbours sport stone breakwaters designed by monk engineers. Grain corridors span the Atlantic. A northern bureaucracy flourishes. Runic tally sticks register cargo, while vellum ledgers, kept safe in rebuilt monastic citadels, track every sea penny. The blizzard that threatened to fracture the Viking millennium instead welded sword, quill, and sail into a single engine of power. In the next part, we will witness how this engine turns south. Norse fleets escort ambassadors up the Tiber, demand trading quarter inside Constantinople's sea walls, and weigh whether to adopt or dethrone the Holy Roman Emperor. Brace for diplomatic cross-currents and the sharp splash of oars in Mediterranean waters. An empire of timber and silver. By the year 1020, the Viking Commonwealth has survived its first true test, the Great Winter of 1012. Grain stores hold. Vinland convoys arrive laden with dried cod and seal oil, and the sea penny remains stable at 1 part copper to 11 parts silver. With famine averted, the thing in gelling turns to grand strategy. Delegates agree to a 10-year fleet expansion, funded by a 1 per 100 levy on all bullion entering Commonwealth harbours. The levy irritates Frankish and Saxon merchants, but they have little choice. Commonwealth escorts dominate the Whale Road, and piracy without their banner is suicide. Ring of timber fortresses surveyors dispatched from Trondheim outline a chain of new wooden bastions down Norway's ragged coast. These wave shields are log palisades married to stone slipways, each garrisoned by 50 Huskarls who rotate every 6 months. The design allows supply cogs to unload in any season and ensures that a raiding fleet can refit without returning to Denmark. Chronicle fragments preserved in the Cathedral of Nidaros list lumber quotas: 300 spruce trunks per bastion, 8 iron-bound gates, and a signalling tower crowned by copper-mirrored beacons. Historians will later dub this the world's first coastal early warning network. Religious syncretism becomes statecraft. At Ribe in 1023, the High Law Speaker ratifies the Concord of Three Fires, a civil code recognizing Odin, Christ, and Frey as co-guardians of the realm. Practical effects matter more than theology. Monasteries receive exemption from the fleet levy if they house scriptoria to copy laws on calfskin. In return, abbots swear to teach Latin numeracy to at least 1 rune mage per district. This quid pro quo fuels literacy and cements a multi-faith bureaucracy. Papal envoys complain of heresy, yet still pay harbour dues in sea pennies, noting their durability compared with clip deniers. Continental pushback. Frankish king Robert the Pious convenes a council at Rennes to counter Norse economic encirclement. Advisors propose a silver curtain, prohibiting sea pennies within Frankish markets. Implementation fails. Merchants simply melt the coins and restamp them with French lilies. English Ethelred, desperate to preserve sovereignty, negotiates an unprecedented treaty. The Commonwealth may station a harbour warden in London for a yearly fee of 20,000 sea pennies paid into the royal treasury. The warden adjudicates maritime disputes and quietly funnels intelligence back to Jelling. Within 2 years, Copenhagen guilds accurately predict English wool prices weeks before domestic weavers. Vinland ascendant. Across the Atlantic, Nye Stadhofen thrives. Census stones, granite markers inscribed each winter, record a population of 4,000 souls by 1030. The Settlements Council adopts fjord land allotments, long narrow strips running from shoreline into forest, ensuring every household controls both timber and cod rights. iron imports remain low, so smiths develop wrought iron lamination using local bog ore blended with scrap nails from decommissioned ships. The alloy proves flexible enough for barrel hoops and spearheads alike. Trade with the Mi'kmaq formalizes. Norse jurists draft the Ravenpelt Accord, guaranteeing hunting corridors and recognizing burial grounds as inviolate. In exchange, Commonwealth ships receive exclusive procurement rights for high-value beaver pelts. Sagas describe a symbolic ceremony. A raven banner dipped in whale oil, then dusted with powdered cedar as sign of mutual guardianship. Modern ethno-historians see in this accord a unique blend of Norse gift economy ritual and indigenous covenant practice. Baltic glass and silk routes. Back in Europe, the unified Commonwealth clamps tariffs on non-Norse ships exiting the Baltic. To circumvent, German merchants propose inland glass factories near Lübeck, producing bead currency coveted in Africa. The Commonwealth responds by founding a state-chartered Raven Company that buys sand from Pomeranian dunes and hires Venetian artisans, captured during a minor skirmish off Istria, to teach true glass blowing. The first Norse glass beads, streaked with cobalt and amber swirls, flood markets in Dublin and York, undercutting continental supply. Profit funds further expeditions down the Volga, where Varangian guards secure silk caravans bound for Novgorod. Litigation and the law ships. Domestic peace depends on dispute resolution. The Commonwealth creates travelling courts, 3 decked ships crewed by jurists and scribes that tour coastal towns each spring. Plaintiffs present cases before rune-etched benches. Verdicts are carved into oak boards and nailed to the masthead. Because literacy levels vary, the law ships carry bards who translate judgments into alliterative verse for local assemblies. Analysis of surviving mast laws reveals sophisticated maritime insurance norms, liability tiers for storm loss, piracy, and Act of Leviathan, a legal fiction covering whale damage. Technological ripples in Europe. Exposure breeds imitation. Norman shipwrights adopt clinker hulls. Frankish forges copy lamination. Most transformative, however, is the adoption of Norse distance governance. The Abbey of Cluny establishes a messenger wherry system on the Sound, mirroring Norse posta itineraria. Papal auditors arriving in 205 days instead of months accelerates church reform initiatives. Ironically, attempts to suppress Norse paganism spread Norse logistics. Climate as catalyst tree ring data indicates a prolonged series of mild summers from 1025 to 1035. Commonwealth sailors record ice-free passages around Scotland lasting into December, allowing winter raids, not for looting, but for cattle purchase. Scottish clans pay in sheep and vellum, commodities less risky than coin under Norse tax codes. Grain imports from the Firth of Forth stabilise Norwegian food reserves, buffering against future cold cycles. Success breeds complacency. Rumblings in Kievan Rus, where Grand Prince Yaroslav fears northern chokehold on Black Sea furs, signal the next confrontation. Simultaneously, an ambitious Vinland Jarl proposes founding a second colony deeper inland, risking conflict with Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The Commonwealth stands at a crossroads: extend the ring of silver and ships ever wider, or consolidate and risk stagnation. A thin winter moon hangs above the Öresund as a convoy of clinker-built warcogs noses past the fires of Helsingør. Their prows gleam with freshly tinned ramplates, and every yard of sail bears the stitched raven of the Commonwealth's treasury. Evidence that this is not a raid, but a tax patrol. Crews keep silent. Speech is rationed in sub-zero air to preserve moisture and morale. Below deck, scribes in fur gloves tally customs parchment by lantern light. recording tolls on every barrel of Wendish amber, leaving the Baltic shield. The silver siphon, by the year 1025, the gelling mint, has struck more than 55 million sea pennies, an order of magnitude beyond pre-Union output. Yet silver ore from the Harz mines is thinning. The Commonwealth solves the shortage by monopolizing the Gulf of Finland grain trade. In Novgorod, Varangian brokers exchange rye for raw silver ore hauled from the Ural foothills by Komi caravans. Because overland transport is risky, the Commonwealth underwrites a chain of ice garths, log stockades built directly on frozen rivers, functioning as winter depots and arbitration courts. Each garth flies a linen pennant, indicating its indemnity rating. The whiter the cloth, the more reliable the guard. Silver ore travels by sled to Viborg, then aboard shallow draft oxboats, escorted by longship sentinels. Spring thaws free the convoy. Coins pour south and re-enter Europe through Hedeby and Ribe markets. Frankish merchants complain that the flow depresses local currency, but still they accept the Raven stamp. Its silver fineness is too consistent to refuse. Christian coalitions and the sword of St. Olaf alarmed, the Archbishop of Hamburg-Bremen convenes a northern synod. Letters between bishoprics, preserved in parchment charters, attest to a plan called Clava Dei, the Club of God. The proposal: assemble German margraves, Polish Piast dukes, and Anglo-Saxon earls into a maritime crusade, citing the Commonwealth's tolerance of pagan oaths as casus belli. Yet internal politics stall the alliance. Henry the Quarrelsome demands Danish border castles as a precondition. The English king, now paying cheaper sea-penny tithes, hesitates. The crusade unravels on paper while the Commonwealth's war cogs sail unopposed along the Frisian coast, collecting portage fees. One incident galvanizes resistance. In 1027, a relic known as the Sword of St. Olaf, allegedly wielded at Stiklestad, is seized by Norse customs in Schleswig. The relic, destined for Cologne, is impounded for unpaid anchorage. Pilgrims riot. Songs lament St. Olaf bound by sea wolves. Chroniclers blame the Commonwealth for sacrilege, ignoring that local toll officers acted without royal decree. Nevertheless, outrage knits German and Norwegian bishoprics into an information network that circulates embargo lists against Raven-stamped bullion. The Vinland copper windfall. Across the Atlantic, Nystadhofen thrives. Prospectors trekking inland discover malachite veins near the future Labrador coast. Smelting pits fire day and night, feeding copper ingots into cargo holds bound for Iceland and Jelling. The shipments solve the Commonwealth's bronze shortage, enabling mass production of scale armour and ship fittings. Vinland's assembly. Things codify strict quotas on timber felling, fearing erosion. Instead, they trade copper for European iron tools, balancing ecological limits with export revenue. Diplomatic envoys from Skraeling, Mi'kmaq and Beothuk clans travel aboard Commonwealth vessels to Norway, where they are received at the Jarl's Hall in Trondheim. Saga fragments carved on walrus ivory describe these meetings. Speeches translated through Norse-Irish interpreters, evenings spent debating lunar tides, and the gifting of pine resin torches that burn even in sleet. The Commonwealth's law speaker recognizes indigenous hunting rights in a charter sealed with intertwined bear's claws, an early international treaty unprecedented in European polity. Timber, sails, and tempered glass. Shipbuilding innovations follow. Baltic oak is scarce, so Vinland pine is laminated with whale oil glue, producing light yet resilient planks. Trondheim glassworkers, inspired by Aldobrandino's southern lens law, temper sand-sourced silica using seal oil furnaces. crafting sextants with glass mirrors, half the weight of brass. Navigators combine these with Arab star tables acquired via Constantinople traders, achieving open ocean precision within 2 degrees latitude, enough to strike Iceland even in winter fog. Longship sailcloth transitions from flax to a Vinland hemp pine resin weave, waterproof yet pliable. Crews now endure North Atlantic gales without constant bailing. Freight capacity doubles. The Commonwealth's annual Fish Sun convoy moves 30,000 dried cod wheels and 15,000 seal oil casks in a single season. Frankish scribes record cod influx depressing Channel herring prices, sparking protests among Norman fishermen. Legal codification. The Frost Law success breeds administration. At the Winter Thing of 1030, law speaker Thora the Ash-Skald introduces the Frost Athingreta, Frost Law. It standardizes tariffs, defines jurisdiction between homeland fiefs and overseas jarldoms, and introduces a maritime salvage code. Any derelict found outside sight of shore belongs 2/3 to the finder, 1/3 to the treasury. Crucially, the code enshrines Seol bread, a subsistence ration drawn from communal granaries for any free Norse who completes a year's overseas service. The policy keeps professional sailors loyal and reduces mutiny. Copies of Frost Law carved on beach boards are dipped in pine tar and hung in every harbour. Monks at Lindisfarne, now under Commonwealth patronage, transcribe a Latin digest. This digest later enters continental law faculties, influencing early mercantile statutes in Lubeck and Bruges. The Baltic grain hedge climate data proxies show a brief cooling, precursor to the Little Ice Age. Anticipating famine, the Commonwealth purchases excess rye from Polish estates, storing it in subterranean ice barns outside Gdansk. To hedge against spoilage, Jelling mints promissory tokens, grain chits, redeemable for rye at fixed ratios. These circulate as parallel currency alongside the sea penny, effectively an early futures market. Polish nobles, cash poor after successive crusade levies, accept chits for war horses, inadvertently tethering their economy to northern granaries. When frost destroys Westphalian harvests in 1033, Jelling releases stored rye, stabilizing prices and showcasing the power of maritime logistics over inland agrarian cycles. Christian conversion by ledger, not sword missionaries, continue to preach, but the Commonwealth's policy of religious syncretism softens conflicts. Bishop Thorkel, a Danish convert, secures permission to build stave churches beside pagan Hofar. In exchange, he audits harbour tolls, adding decimal notation learned from Andalusian scholars. The church's role as accountant wins merchants' favour, and baptism rates climb among trading families, not for salvation, but for reliable bookkeeping. Papal envoys, initially hopeful, grow wary once they discover that priests must submit tithe ledgers for sea penny verification. Rome issues a bull condemning ledger heresy, yet lacks naval muscle to enforce it. Anglo-Scandinavian entanglements. In England, King Ethelred's treasury bleeds silver to maintain standing fired garrisons. When merchants petition for sea penny acceptance to pay taxes, Parliament balks. The Commonwealth exploits the rift by offering London merchants a reduced harbour levy if they adopt sea pennies. Smuggling ramps up along the Humber. English Boers find barrels of Norse coin hidden under bales of Flemish wool. A tipping point arrives when the Earls of Northumbria convene at Bamberg and secretly swear auxiliary support to the Commonwealth Navy in exchange for guaranteed grain shipments during famine. The pact triggers political crisis. Ethelred arrests suspected collaborators, but news arrives that a Norse flotilla has landed at Jarrow, not to raid, but to deliver relief rye. Common folk welcome the grain. Royal legitimacy totters. Chroniclers dubbed the episode the Bread Betrayal, marking the beginning of England's economic drift into the northern sphere. Technological diffusion and the iron forest forge resource wealth enables industrial experiments. In the iron forest east of Lake Malloran, charcoal burners feed blast furnaces modelled on Chinese designs transmitted via rust traders. These furnaces smelt low phosphorus bog iron into steel billets, suitable for cross-riveted chainmail. Commonwealth smiths brand the mail with small raven eye stamps. Armour shipments to Vinland protect settlers against polar bear maulings and boost sagas of invincible sky iron. Word spreads. Parisian captains commission raven mail, paying in Bordeaux claret and Chartres wool tapestries. Blast furnace slag yields mass-produced millstones that the Commonwealth sells to Rhineland abbeys in exchange for manuscript copies. Thus, technological and cultural capital circulate in a barter network spanning 3,000 kilometers. Crisis. The Great Lantern Storm. All is not smooth. In 1034, the Lantern Storm, a cyclone of snow and thunder, smashes the Norwegian Sea. 27 cogs sink. Their wrecks scatter whale oil lanterns that ignite floating debris, turning midnight waves into sheets of fire. News reaches Jelling. Investors panic. The Treasury announces emergency wetting tax, shaving 1 grain of silver from each sea penny minted henceforth. Opposition jarls decry debasement, threatening to secede. Law Speaker Thora responds with Thingfire. An emergency assembly convened via beacon chain. Over 4 nights, jarls debate by signal bonfires across headlands, relaying yes-no votes through semaphore boards at sunrise. The final tally approves the tax by narrow margin, showcasing a prototype of remote democracy. The storm crisis, though costly, proves the Commonwealth can flex fiscal policy without fracturing. Legal aftershocks and maritime insurance. In the wake, the Treasury collaborates with Jewish financiers from Mainz to create sea loan contracts, adventure scripts, ensuring cargo losses at graduated premiums. Underwriting tables factor storm season, piracy risk, and crew health. The documents, witnessed by rabbis and rune scribes alike, cross religious boundaries and set legal precedent for shared maritime risk. Sea penny liquidity deepens, commerce resumes. Cultural synthesis and the Saga Gospel schools incorporate Christian themes into Saga meter, crafting the Saga Gospel of St. Halvard, where martyrdom merges with quest narrative. Illuminated manuscripts bound in calfskin weave vine-style Carolingian initials around knotwork borders. Scriptoria at York, now a joint Norse-Anglo foundation, produce bilingual texts in Old Norse and Latin. The Church tolerates the hybrid as evangelical tool. Jarls value it as prestige gift. By the mid-11th century, the Viking Commonwealth stands not merely as a maritime empire, but as an information civilization. Beacon chains relay laws, semaphore fires ratify taxes, and sea lanes shuttle copper, cod, and codices between 4 continents. Its resilience lies in decentralized decision-making combined with ruthless logistics. Yet challenges loom. A surging Christian coalition on the continent, environmental cooling, and the delicate balance of multicultural treaties overseas. In the next installment, we will witness whether innovation and oaths can outpace crusade banners and climate shift. An icy haze hangs over the Gulf of Bothnia as dawn breaks in the year 1032. Below decks on the Commonwealth flagship Wave Serpent, an iron-studded chest is unsealed, revealing silver plate destined for an audience in Novgorod. The voyage is more than commerce. It is a test of the Northern Alliance's new Eastern doctrine: trade first, tribute later. Over the next decade, this policy will redraw Baltic diplomacy, bind Varangian Guards ever closer to the Rus court, and funnel grain to the North Sea heartlands, even as climate shift shortens growing seasons at home. Climate jitters and agricultural engineering tree ring data from later centuries confirm what contemporary sagas already sense. Harsher winters arrive more often. In response, the Commonwealth's Thing enacts the Winter Dearth Act, subsidizing peat brick field architecture in Skåne and Gotland. Peat walls capture residual warmth, extending barley's viability by 10 crucial days. Tax ledgers preserved in Uppsala list a 5% yield bump by 1035. Small, but enough to stabilize ship lading schedules through the Öresund. Crucially, peat terraces become communal property, binding freeholders and thralls alike into maintenance cooperatives that will later birth proto-democratic village councils. The Novgorod Compact negotiations at Holmgard, Novgorod, take place not in halls but aboard anchored cogs, following plague-derived sanitary custom imported from the West. Commonwealth envoys present sea pennies stamped with the Raven standard, promising stable bullion flows if Novgorod replaces Byzantine bezants in its fur markets. Chronicles by the monk scribe Kirill record the pact as Sudar's peace, in exchange for a 1/10 duty on all pine marten pelts. Norse escorts secure river convoys down the Volkhov and Lovat. The arrangement diverts revenue that once fed Constantinople's treasury, sparking quiet alarm among Byzantine merchants. Hanseatic countermeasures Lübeck and Visby, threatened by northern consolidation, forged the first Baltic counterleague. Meeting minutes, later copied into the Lübecker Stadtrecht, outline 3 prongs: preferential harbour dues for non-Commonwealth merchants, bonded warehouses offering plague-compliant fumigation cheaper than Norse ports, and a flotilla of shallow draft patrol coggers equipped with Greek fire-inspired pitch throwers. Despite grand plans, the patrol fund runs dry within 3 seasons. Sea penny liquidity outbids Hanseatic scrip, and sailors quietly prefer Norse wages paid in hard silver. Monastic literacy surge Cistercian and Benedictine houses within the Commonwealth realm receive royal exemption from tithe in exchange for educating the children of shipwrights and sailmakers. Surviving parchment rosters from the Abbey of Nidarholm list over 200 lay students by 1040, half of them girls, a demographic ripple from chronic male attrition at sea. Literate artisans, in turn, copy ship manuals and timber inspection charts, sowing a culture of standards documentation unprecedented in Northern Europe. Codex Liber Navalis, compiled at Lindisfarne under Norse patronage, becomes the de facto reference for mast ratios and rudder angles across the empire. Naval bureaucracy and the salt ledger reform centralization breeds paperwork. The Thing commissions the salt ledger, an empire-wide registry numbering every salt pan from Jutland to Iceland. Each entry logs brine weight, lattice type, and seasonal output. The ledger allows quartermasters to balance salt pork stores fleet-wide, reducing scurvy deaths noted in earlier expedition diaries. Economic historians equate the salt ledger's impact to that of the Domesday Book, arguing it forms a statistical backbone enabling deliberate population growth rather than opportunistic settlement. Religious confluence and the dual altar compromise. Missionaries from Hamburg-Bremen condemn Norse pagan rites, yet cannot ignore Commonwealth might. In 1037, the Synod of Ribe reaches a dual altar compromise. Churches in Norse territory may house both Christ's cross and Odin's ravens. provided tithes flow to Rome and local jarls equally. Illuminated charter pages show a crucifix flanked by stylized birds, visual proof of negotiated syncretism. The arrangement placates Rome while preserving Commonwealth cultural cohesion. Papal envoys grumble, but silver shipments to the Curia cushion theological discomfort. Vinland's copper boom. Across the Atlantic, miners near Saguenay strike copper lodes. Norse settlers in Nystadhofen barter iron tools with Iroquoian traders for guidance upriver. By 1042, copper ingots appear in Thing tariffs. Archaeometallurgy tests from 20th century digs identify isotopic signatures matching Canadian deposits, confirming saga claims long dismissed as legend. The influx funds a line of 24-oared copper cogs, purpose-built for heavy ore. Their wide keels will later evolve into the trademark hull form of northern seaborne commerce. Legal ripples, the fjord statutes. Copper profits ignite property disputes in Vinland. Thing delegates draft fjord statutes declaring that mineral claims extend one boat length beyond shore and downward to the heartstone of the earth. The phrasing anticipates later Anglo-American concepts of mineral rights. Copies carved onto spruce boards wash back to Bergen, where law speakers integrate them into the Commonwealth legal canon, cementing overseas provinces within metropolitan jurisprudence. Security pivot. From raids to escorts, raid culture fades as the Commonwealth Navy repurposes longships into escort screens for copper and fur convoys. Training manuals found in the Trondheim Arsenal detail shield wall tactics adapted for deck combat against Hanseatic fire rafts. Sailor pay ledgers show a shift. Bounty for captured cargo is replaced by fixed salaries and convoy bonuses, an early wage economy at sea. By the close of 1050, the Commonwealth stands at a crossroads. Heavier ships strain traditional clinker methods, climate volatility tugs at barley harvests, and Rome eyes syncretic churches with growing unease. Yet silver flows steady, literacy climbs, and the salt ledger promises logistical finesse. The stage is set for either bureaucratic overstretch or a leap toward a Viking-ruled North Atlantic empire. Stay aboard. The Whale Road only widens from here. A damp smell of peat smoke hangs over York at midwinter when the Viking Commonwealth unveils its boldest diplomatic gamble yet, the Council of Three Crowns. Delegates from Norway, Denmark, the Swedish Jarldoms, and the recently subdued Danelaw meet in what was once St. Peter's Chapter House, its nave torn down 2 decades earlier to widen the wharf for North Sea convoys. Now, the stone shell serves as neutral ground. Each delegation occupies a cordon dais behind waist-high bronze rails, physical reminders that no retainer may cross without forfeiting his life. The Assembly's goal is stark: craft a unified tariff schedule and guarantee naval escort for grain convoys running the Thames-Oslo-Revel Triangle. Consensus emerges after 11 sleepless nights punctuated by minor duels outside the city palisade. The resulting Charter of York fixes export levies in sea pennies, undercuts Anglo-Saxon coinage by 1/10, and stipulates that any ship-defined convoy discipline becomes more utleger, ocean outlaw, liable to seizure by any Commonwealth captain. Royal scribes engrave duplicate bronze plates and set them into wharf pilings at Hedeby, Nystadhofen, and Novgorod, so that every sailor may read them at low tide. Within 2 harvest cycles, grain volatility in northern marts falls by half, while the sea penny cements its dominance along the Baltic Rim. Christian countercurrents. The Charter indirectly provokes Rome. Pope John XIX, frustrated that Archbishop Elfric of Canterbury can no longer remit Peter's pence without Commonwealth approval, dispatches envoys urging Frankish princes to embargo Norse ports. Yet Frankish treasuries depend on Baltic amber and Novgorodian fir. Embargo talk fizzles. Instead, monastic scriptoria in Tours and Fulda launch a pamphlet war, circulating Latin sermons likening unified Vikings to Gog and Magog. The Commonwealth responds through soft power. Norse skalds touring Paris perform bilingual sagas, where Christ and Odin exchange riddles and part as wary allies. Frankish audiences, hungry for exotic spectacle, pack nightly recitations, eroding papal alarm with applause. Knights of the Shallow Sea military adaptation follows commerce. The Commonwealth Naval Office establishes Skjaldmær marine cohorts, mixed-gender boarding units trained for lightning strikes along tidal flats. Their signature weapon is the bill hook spear, optimized to yank knights from saddles wading through marsh. Chronicles from Picardy record a skirmish where 30 Skjaldmær rout double their number of Frankish cavalry by severing girths and reins. More shocking to contemporaries, the Norse fighters carry small iron-bound chests of silver and parchments, guaranteeing ransom rates in advance, thus turning capture into transaction and speeding prisoner exchanges. The practice outrages chivalric codes, but proves so efficient that Burgundian mercenaries adopt similar chests within a decade. Glass and fire in Vinland. Across the Atlantic, Nystadhofen's population passes 5,000 souls, fueled by timber rights and copper lodes along the Gaspé coast. A guild of Frisian glassblowers, invited by Commonwealth decree, erects the first smeltery in the New World, its furnace dome modelled on Rhineland beehive kilns. Powered by endless pine and cooled by coastal fog, the works produce green-tinted panes durable enough to ship east. Archaeometric slag analysis centuries later will trace medieval European stained glass to Vinland silica, rewriting art history textbooks. This industrial beachhead prompts geopolitical ripples. Micmac traders negotiate supply monopolies on beaver pelts in exchange for preferential glass bead prices. The resulting proto-treaty, recorded on birch bark scrolls and ratified with cross-hatched tattoo signatures, stands as one of history's earliest bilateral trade accords between indigenous North Americans and Europeans. Commonwealth jurists cite the pact when drafting future colonial statutes, enshrining the concept that trade alliances, not conquest, should anchor overseas relations, at least in the North Atlantic. Silk Road, ice road back in Eurasia, a warming trend shortens winter ice on the Volga, threatening the lucrative sled convoys from Perm iron mines. The Commonwealth sponsors an audacious engineering project, the Ice Road Causeway, a lattice of prefabricated cedar planks pinned to pack ice with whalebone stakes and continually flooded to refreeze. Overseers rotate crews in 12-hour shifts, each housed in felt yurts imported from Kumenstep allies. The method maintains a drivable surface into late March, 2 fortnights longer than nature affords, allowing iron to reach Novgorod before spring mud closes the land routes. The logistical triumph impresses rival principalities. Muscovite princes petition for technical blueprints, bargaining hostages for secrets. Faith recalibrated, the convergence of trade, warfare and technology pushes religion towards syncretism. Bishops in recently reconquered York, newly dependent on Norse tariffs, draft homilies acknowledging the all-watchful providence. A deft linguistic bridge permitting parishioners to envision Christ and Odin under one cosmic roof. Canterbury uploads formal complaints to Rome, but the papal docket, overwhelmed by Italian famine pleas, lets the issue stagnate. In practice, Northumbrian churches display both carved crosses and stylized ravens on organ panels, confusing later art historians. The great coin debasement prosperity carries risk. To fund fortress upgrades along the Seine, the Commonwealth Council secretly authorises a light reduction in silver purity, 1 grain per sea penny. Alert Vinland assayers detect the shift within months and refuse shipments priced in debased coins. Panic spreads. Hedeby's bullion market spikes, and rumours of fiscal betrayal spark a brief run on Jelling's mint. The crisis resolves only after the council invites 20 foreign moneyers to witness new, heavier dies struck in public. Economic annals cite the episode as the first data-driven confidence crash in Northern Europe, notable for being mitigated without violence through transparent audit rather than decree. Education as strategy amid monetary turmoil. The Commonwealth invests in knowledge. The great thing at RIBE funds the Skolawege School Road, stipends granting one promising youth from every 100 households free passage to scholarly courts in Lund or Uppsala. Curricula emphasize navigation, comparative law, and multilingual literacy, including Frankish and Arabic. Graduation requires composing a legal clause in both runic and Roman scripts, then defending its logic before a panel of schools and priests. The first cohort returns to find trading posts waiting. Within 5 years, multilingual clerks double the speed of customs clearance at North Sea ports, boosting revenue to offset the silver scare. Storm clouds from the steppe intelligence arrives of Khazar remnants regrouping along the Don, offering to sell passage rights to steppe horse herds in exchange for sea pennies. Council strategists debate pre-emptive diplomacy versus maritime focus. Ultimately, they sanction a limited embassy escorted by Skaldmere detachments, counting on the spectacle to impress nomad chieftains. Journals of the envoy. Brander Thorson describe vast grass oceans and portable synagogues where Hebrew psalms mingle with Turkic laments, a cultural mosaic that echoes the Commonwealth's own syncretic rituals. Negotiations yield a horse levy. 10,000 step mounts delivered over 3 summers, dramatically boosting cavalry capacity in Scandinavian heartlands ill-suited to endemic breeding. By 1045, Commonwealth scouts on Iberian marches ride swift, wedge-tailed steeds never before seen west of the Rhine, altering perceptions of Norse warfare. The Commonwealth enters its 3rd generation, straddling 2 oceans and half a continent. Its silver coin backs trade, yet rabbles can shake it. Its warriors dazzle, yet pamphlets sway hearts in Paris. Glass smoulders in Vinland kilns. Ice roads stitch Siberian routes, and a syncretic faith hovers over cathedrals adorned with ravens. Whether the edifice survives hinges on balancing transparency with authority, diplomacy with pillage, coin with conscience. The next chapter will test that balance, as an excommunicated Frankish prince seeks Norse arms for a crusade that could split the Commonwealth from within and expose the first fissures in an empire that has yet to taste defeat. A pearl-pale dawn rises over the marshlands of Utrecht as the Commonwealth convenes its first great shipwright moot on continental soil. Poplar masts jut above the river quays like a forest of spears, each wrapped in freshly tarred linen to keep Dutch damp from swelling the grains. From Vinland to the Danelaw, delegates arrive bearing plank samples and keel blueprints sealed in beeswax cloth. The agenda is stark. If the Norse oceanic realm is to flourish beyond tribute and timber, it must master deep draft cargo giants capable of crossing the whale road year-round. Maritime ambition and the Kiel Charter. The moot unfolds in a converted cloister, whose arches now echo with hammer rings rather than hymns. 3 days of measured debate end with the Kiel Charter. a statute mandating that every coastal shire contribute 2 long keel sections and a tithe of pine pitch toward a fleet of grand cogs dubbed SUBSRIBE, herring ships, named for the silver tax they intend to haul. Financial backing comes from the gelling mint in the form of silver letters of credit, redeemable across Commonwealth ports. In exchange, the mint claims a 1/8 stake in future freight. The Kiel Charter effectively nationalizes maritime innovation, welding local ambition into a pan-Norse industrial policy. Shipwright logs preserved at Hardanger list experimental hull ratios trialed in tidal pools, each design tested for stability by loading stones equal to 3 oxen. Successive prototypes double cargo capacity over the old beamier Vinland cogs. By the close of the decade, SUBSRIBE out-tonnage Hanseatic hulks plying the Baltic, signalling a quiet but decisive technological leap. Banking the wind, the rise of maritime credit houses. Larger hulls demand deeper coffers. Enter the Copper Wolf Syndicate, a consortium of Vinland copper magnates and Trondheim wool exporters. They pioneer a maritime bill called the Salt Letter, a negotiable promise of freight space on outbound SUBSRIBE, collateralized by the cargo holds themselves. Salt letters trade at slight discounts in Oslo and Rouen, effectively turning projected ocean wind into liquid capital. As circulation grows, secondary markets blossom in Dublin, alehouses where scribes note bid-ask spreads on chalkboards. Economists 3 centuries later will identify these swaps as early futures contracts. Cathedral archives in York contain correspondence between the Archbishop and a syndicate factor, discussing whether accepting salt letters for tithe violates canon. The Archbishop allows it, provided redemption occurs in hard silver within 4 harvests. The decision tacitly blesses speculative finance and ties church revenues to Viking shipping success. Diplomatic currents. The Treaty of Solar Rock. SUBSRIBE expansion alarms the Iberian crowns, whose convoys from Guinea risk interception within widening Norse patrol arcs. Castilian envoys propose a non-aggression pact at Finisterre, but Commonwealth Jarls counteroffer a broader maritime passage agreement. Negotiations migrate to a tiny granite islet off Brittany, later known as Solar Rock, chosen for its neutrality and the solar calendar rune carved there by Bronze Age mariners. The resulting accord recognizes Norse open sea lanes in exchange for limited docking rights in Cantabrian harbours, where plague-conscious protocols require Viking crews to remain aboard, while locals unload cargo under watch of Commonwealth inspectors. Castile wins reduced piracy. The Norse secure Atlantic resupply nodes. The Solar Rock clauses also include mutual rescue covenants. Any crew sighted adrift earns safe harbour regardless of banner. This humanitarian addendum, spearheaded by Vinland delegates scarred by North Atlantic storms, shapes later Admiralty law. Religious convergence and the runic Psalter, prolonged contact with Christian polities tempers Norse pagan orthodoxy. Skaldic halls now host itinerant monks fluent in Old Norse, trading parchment psalters for carved whalebone lyric tablets. The watershed comes when Bishop Odo of Canterbury and Skald Agrim Half-Tongue compile the runic Psalter, a bilingual liturgy blending gospel passages with kennings of Odin's wisdom. Manuscript fragments recovered in Lund show salmon skin covers stitched with silver wire, pages illuminated in copper greens and deep lapis. The Psalter grants theological scaffolding for mixed-faith households scattered across Danelaw and Normandy, easing political friction. Critics in Rome decry syncretism, yet papal legates secretly purchase copies, noting the Psalter's potential to stretch Christendom northward without crusade expense. Over the ensuing generation, communion rites in York Minster include harp interludes set to Norse pentameter, an acoustic symbol of cultural braid. Vineland Ascendant, the copper standard, back across the Whale Road. Ny Stadshöfen, metamorphoses from frontier outpost to mint town. Copper veins along the Gaspé coast arrive in assay trays stamped with the Raven seal. Smelters refine ore into thin planchets plated with gelling silver. Bimetallic coins dubbed copper tails because of the foxpelt watermark pressed into each tail side. Copper tails circulate throughout Greenland and Iceland, relieving silver shortages and providing small change liquidity for fur trade microtransactions. Ledgers in Reykjavik show fisherfolk settling debts for cod barrels in stacks of copper tails, 24 to the sea penny. With coinage comes bureaucracy. The Vinland Ting crafts its first written law code on birch bark sheets, sealed between pine boards, codifying trade weights identical to Danish ells. Uniform standards smooth intercontinental commerce, and copper tail debasement remains low thanks to abundant ore. Archaeometallurgical analysis in modern times reveals mint marks corresponding to individual smelter families, evidence of traceable quality control centuries ahead of its time. Continental reaction, the Baltic toll. War success breeds jealousy. Hanseatic merchants petition Lübeck's council to levy punitive tolls on Sildskip passing through the Öresund. The move sparks the Baltic Toll War, fought not with swords, but with ledger strikes and chain booms. Viking convoys bypass Hansa ports, unloading at newly fortified Helsingør instead. Trade deserts drive Hamburg grain prices upward, inciting urban riots. Chroniclers describe bakeries barricaded by iron cauldrons to fend off bread mobs. Sensing leverage, Commonwealth diplomats propose that aggrieved Hanse towns join the Sea Penny Zone, accepting Viking coin and quarantine protocols in return for access to Vinland timber and cod. Rostock capitulates first, followed by Wismar. Lübeck holds out until a spring herring glut spoils in its quarantine pens owing to labour shortages. The Baltic Toll War ends without bloodshed, but redraws economic borders. Norse silver buys Baltic political capital more effectively than raids ever did. Science under sail. The Star Compendium of Skagen. Navigational demands spur astronomical collaboration. In Skagen, astronomer Ingrid Björnsdotter compiles the Star Compendium, an atlas synthesizing Arabic astral charts smuggled through Ottoman middlemen with traditional Norse horizon markers. She annotates star heights using a prototype declination board of driftwood and brass sight tubes. Surviving vellum leaves display marginalia, instructing helmsmen how to adjust for hull sway during North Sea gales. The compendium circulates among Commonwealth captains who record corrections onto inserted parchment slips. An iterative dataset akin to a floating scientific journal. Ingerd's methods creep south. Portuguese pilots petition for licensed copies, but legal scribes in gelling restrict export, dubbing celestial expertise strategic wind. The policy foreshadows modern intellectual property and fuels a clandestine market for astronomical knowledge. Public health meets high seas. Chronic plague paranoia remains a shaping force. Sildskip decks include copper-lined infirmary cages where sailors showing rash or fever isolate behind mesh screens. Apothecary logs detail honey-soaked moss dressings for wound care and distilled spruce beer prescribed as tonic. Port records from Bergen show that ships reporting 0 fever days receive harbour fee rebates, aligning economic incentive with hygiene. When an outbreak does occur, the afflicted vessel hoists a striped pennant, diverting to quarantine islands outfitted with stone lodges and smokehouses for fumigating sails. medical oversight extends shoreward. Utrecht invents the river toll chamber, a floating customs house where inspectors examine cargo midstream, sparing inland markets from shipborne pathogens. Drawings in the Utrecht Guild Book depict rat-proof grain silos teetering on stilt legs above the river wash, prototypes for later Dutch granaries. Cultural flourish, the saga press's movable type, having reached Scandinavia a generation prior, now marries Norse storytelling. The saga presses of Stavanger churn out cheap chapbooks recounting exploits of Commonwealth admirals and Vinland explorers. Printed on rag paper impregnated with birch tar, the pages resist sea damp and reek pleasantly of forest. Literacy classes spring up in coastal mead halls, where shipwright apprentices learn rune letters and Latin script side by side, enabling them to pass cargo logs and romantic verse in equal measure. One runaway bestseller, The Foxtail Voyage, dramatizes the coppertail minting process as heroic alchemy. Ballads from the chapbook find their way into English taverns, where minstrels mispronounce Norse names yet spread Commonwealth propaganda disguised as entertainment. Cultural historians later credit these pocket sagas with soft power influence rivaling Coin and Keel. Looking toward the Northern Passage, as the century closes, whispered reports reach gelling of ice-choked straits north of Vinland that thaw for brief weeks under midnight sun. Cartographers debate a northern passage to Cathay, a dream of silks without Ottoman tariffs. The Hything commissions a feasibility expedition, led by Captain Solveig 2 Stars, so named for the paired comets she claims to have seen at birth. Shipwrights fit her salskip with reinforced bow timbers clad in seal hide to shrug off brash ice. Apothecaries develop whale blubber liniment as frostbite salve. Departure ceremonies at Nie Stadhofen draw settlers draped in dyed sealskin cloaks. A choir of Mi'kmaq singers perform a blessing translated into Old Norse cadence. Chroniclers note the mingled smell of spruce resin, whale oil lamps, and salt spray, a scent later romanticized in countless saga verses. Back in Europe, kings and popes alike watch the ice gamble with conflicting dread and curiosity. If the Norse unlock an Arctic corridor, their maritime monopoly could strangle southern spice routes. Yet common folk, weary of tithe hikes and plague cordons, cheer the prospect of cheaper luxuries. Rumour alone shifts markets. Genoese pepper prices dip as speculators hedge against future Norse imports. An empire once stitched from oak and oath now threads copper, credit, and printed saga. Shipyards hum, mints glow, and psalms mingle with skaldic chants. The Viking Commonwealth stands at the cusp of a polar leap that could join oceans and eclipse rivals. Yet each triumph tightens reliance on coordination across storms, ice, and fragile treaties. For now, let ink dry, let sails rest, and let the algorithms of this modern mead hall carry our saga to curious ears across every shore. Solveig 2 Stars stands on the frost-etched deck of the Silblazer, her flagship's prow sheathed in seal hide over double-planked oak, the hull braced by iron dogs forged in Vinland's forges. It is midsummer 1063, and yet ice floes bob like marble headstones across the strait locals call Sarkak. The expedition's mission is explicit. Chart a navigable corridor from Vinland to the Laptov Sea, thereby collapsing Europe to Cathay transit times by 2/3 and bypassing every toll and tithe between Cairo and the Crimea. Northwest Passage reconnaissance 4 ships accompany the flagship. 2 Sildskip rigged for cargo, 1 ballast-heavy tender packed with salted cod and walrus blubber, and a shallow draft scout keel named the Snowfin docked Solvay's fleet carries a flotilla of skin-hulled umiaks, loaned by Inuit trappers in exchange for bronze spearheads. Their shallow keels will sound shoals where oak hulls dare not tread. Daily observations are etched onto copper tablets coated in pine charcoal. The soot layer can be scraped smooth with a bone scraper, allowing reuse in sub-zero drafts. Sealed into walrus bladders, these ice logs withstand brine better than vellum. Surviving tablets stored at Reykjavik's Aldursafn show latitude readings within half a degree of modern reckoning, evidence of the compendium's accuracy. After 37 days bucking pack ice, the Snowfin reports a lead stretching east. Solvay orders the fleet into single file, sails reefed, oars shipped to avoid thumping hulls. Crewmen line rails wielding ice pikes tipped with tempered Vinland copper, chipping flows into meltwater. At 87 degrees west, the fleet sights a pod of beluga whales sounding beneath football field slabs of turquoise ice. The whales' migratory direction signals open water ahead, a detail later confirmed by Inuit oral maps. Encounter at the Crystal Beach. On the 59th day, the expedition makes landfall on an island of glacial till and mica-flecked sand. Solveig dubs Kristrond, Crystal Beach. A cairn is raised atop a basalt knoll, capped with a foxtail copper coin fixed under a rune-carved stone finger pointing east. Recent archaeological digs on Devon Island corroborate this event, uncovering a coppertail dated by metallurgical signature to Vinland Mint Lot 1047. Southern reaction. The Canal of St. Isidore. Word of the Arctic push reaches Iberia via Biscayan traders months later. Castile and Aragon, fearing loss of Levantine spice rents, dust off an old Roman engineering rumour. A ditch across the Trajanic Isthmus connecting the Mediterranean to the Atlantic at Seville. Royal Charter grants the Order of St. Isidore authority to survey, fund and fortify a canal. Monastic engineers import Arabic water screw designs from Toledo's libraries and draft the Isidorian lock. Paired stone chambers sealed by bronze gates counterweighted with olive wood beams. Financing hinges on canal bonds, underwritten by Genoese banks and collateralized against future transit tolls. Papal indulgence absolves bond purchasers of maritime sins, a marketing masterstroke that fills the treasury inside 2 seasons. Draft horses drag the first shovels through chalky soil at San Luca in autumn 1065, initiating Europe's earliest true megaproject. Norse envoys in Cordoba note canal news, with mixed alarm and curiosity. Their own realm lacks the manpower and Mediterranean climate to replicate such earthworks. Asian glass and the porcelain revelation. Meanwhile, Commonwealth merchants in the Kipchak step in counter caravans bearing glazed bowls that sound like bells when flicked. Porcelain, unknown in European kilns, shocks the Norse with its translucency and strength. Caravan master Zhao Wenbei agrees to trade 50 crates in exchange for a pledge of Arctic furs and access to Vinland copper futures. The goods traverse the Volga route to Novgorod, then sail west to Hedeby in special straw-lined amphorae to prevent chipping. Skald Runa, Iron Voice, composes an ode comparing porcelain's sheen to frozen fjord echoes. The poem spreads faster than the porcelain itself. Saga presses in Stavanger print broadsides titled "The White Gold of Cathay, Stoking Consumer Fever." Vineland glassmakers scramble to replicate the material, fusing quartz sand with mussel ash in high-temp kilns powered by peat-fed blast furnaces. Results are brittle. Failure rates top 80%. Jellings Mint issues a bounty for any guild who can blow a goblet thin enough to ring. kickstarting Europe's first material science race. Political jockeying in the Baltic Lübeck's Council, still reeling from the Baltic Toll War, spies opportunity. They propose a tripartite naval union, Norse, Hansa, and Novgorodian, dedicated to porcelain procurement. In exchange for naval escorts through pirate waters of Gotland, Hansa ports will drop tolls on Sildskip, loaded with Asian wares. Commonwealth Jarls debate the proposal at Viking. Southern merchants argue collaboration will pivot Hansa resentment into mutual gain. Northern raiders call it capitulation. Minutes from the debate preserved in birchbark shorthand show a compromise. Hansa ships may join convoys only if they adopt Norse quarantine protocols, including on-deck infirmary cages and copper-lined bilge covers. Lübeck concedes, viewing porcelain margins as worth the cost. The treaty forms the Maritime League of the White Bowl, the earliest joint stock trading company in world history. Solvay's return and the Arctic ledger snow melt opens the Vinland harbour of Ny-Stadhofen on the summer solstice, 1066, just as Solvay's fleet ghosts in, hulls scarred but intact. Her ice logs display a continuous passage to what she claims is a vast eastern ocean. Rijksarchiv engravings of the ice corridor depict seal-clad sailors steering by midnight sun arcs, with stylized comets, Solvay's trademark, above. The High Thing convenes an emergency moot, branding the route the Nordvestweg and granting Solvay the title Havfrieste, Sea Frozen. Copper Wolf Syndicate accountants update their risk tables. Arctic Transit reduces spice delivery times to 4 months and sidesteps 20% of bribes paid along Levant caravan routes. They draft Nordvestweg bonds, pegged to a new currency unit, the Ice Mark, redeemable only upon successful cargo delivery through the passage. Porcelain mania and urban fire codes. Cities from Dublin to Danzig erupt in porcelain mania. Domestic hearth accidents rise as families attempt kiln experiments in backyards. York City Council issues the fire bylaw of 1067, mandating brick chimneys and banning peat kilns within bowshot of the Minster. Carpenter guilds pivot to chimney lining, spiking oak prices. In Trondheim, failed porcelain batches are crushed into glazing sand for Sildskip hulls, producing a glittering lacquer effect that doubles as anti-fouling layer. Canal versus Corridor, competing newsletters. Stavanger Saga Press launches the Ice Path Ledger, a weekly newsletter tracking Solvay's route-sounding depths, fur markets, and bond prices. In Seville, the Order of St. Isidore counters with the Canal Chronicle, boasting excavation milestones, pilgrimage indulgence counts, and artist impressions of water staircases fit for kings. Scholars note these newsletters as embryonic mass media shaping investor sentiment on rival megaprojects. Health protocols clash. Canal engineers face malaria outbreaks in Guadiana marshes. Norse critics crow that southern kings traded fleas for mosquitoes. Conversely, Arctic convoys suffer scurvy despite spruce needle ale rations. Vinland apothecaries experiment with dried seaweed wafers rich in ascorbic salts. Survival improves. By 1070, the High Thing passes the Greenleaf Statute, requiring ocean fleets to store 2 pounds of seaweed per head. Maritime League captains grouse at cargo displacement, yet comply. Religious diplomacy and the porcelain chalice. A turning point arrives when Bishop Odo commissions a communion chalice from Cathay porcelain. During Easter Mass in Canterbury, sunlight pours through stained glass, striking the milk-white cup so it glows like molten snow. Pilgrims gasp. Some claim to see Christ's face in the translucence. Rome dispatches theologians to verify no pagan spellwork is embedded in the glaze. Their report deems porcelain a vessel worthy of grace, inadvertently sanctifying Asian trade. In response, the High Thing gifts a rune-etched porcelain horn to the Pope, braided in silver wire. Papal archives describe it as barbarous yet sublime. Diplomatic pathways widen. Missionary envoys secure safe conduct to Vinland, to minister to mixed-faith settlements, opening new avenues for cultural exchange. Economic tipping point. By decade's end, ice marks and canal bonds compete on every bourse from Rouen to Riga. Market pamphlets lampoon each side with woodcuts. Polar bears hauling spice chests versus monks drowning under floodgates. War risk insurers in Genoa hedge by purchasing both. Meanwhile, weather records show decreasing pack ice thickness, emboldening Arctic voyages but worrying shepherds in the Alps. Foreshadowing the next century, scholars at the time sensed tectonic change. Whichever corridor, Arctic or Andalusian, proves cheapest and safest will dictate Europe's economic axis. The Viking Commonwealth sits astride one edge of that fulcrum, Iberia the other, Hanse merchants and Italian bankers balancing in between. Spice jars and porcelain bowls become proxy battlegrounds for sovereignty itself. But technological leaps breed unforeseen challenges. Arctic magnets disrupt compasses, and water thieves tunnel beneath canal embankments. Salt letters, ice marks, and canal bonds weave a web so dense that a failed convoy or collapsed lock could spark systemic collapse long before anyone utters the words financial contagion. The saga will conclude with the initial sailings of fully laden porcelain fleets through the Nordvestweg, the grand opening of the Isidorian Canal, and the sudden appearance of a new wildcard, gunpowder recipes arriving from Cathay in porcelain jars, threatening to transform warfare faster than any keel or lock. For now, the North Sea never sleeps, and neither do the ledgers tracking its fortunes. Modern reverberations walk through any coastal capital in the present day, and the legacy of a millennium under the Raven banner is impossible to miss. Port authorities still fly windflayer streamers, thin pennants whose notched ends echo the cloth teeth once sewn to frighten Frankish shore guards. Container carriers queue beneath them like distant descendants of clinker-built longships, their hull bows painted in stylized knotwork that doubles as corporate branding. Cruise tourists sip juniper-infused ale on observation decks while listening to safety briefings delivered in Old Norse loanwords. Styrboard for right, bakboard for left, sicker for secure. The language of the Commonwealth never replaced Latin outright, yet it braided itself into public life so thoroughly that modern European law still quotes contract clauses in stretched Norse compounds. A Madrid startup calls its app for tracing supply chains Vardlisa, beacon light, because every high-speed packet it routes hops along the optical equivalent of the old fire tower network that once signaled raids, or later, wheat prices, from Oslo to Rome in a single night. Schoolchildren in Reykjavik and Ravenna alike grow up carving their initials in soft pine using simplified runes, a rite that turns personal handwriting into a living heritage font. Maritime architecture followed suit. Glass-roofed ferry terminals in Copenhagen and Bristol rest on pillars angled like dragon ship ribs, optimized to split storm surges learned over centuries of North Sea engineering. Even pedestrian bridges borrow the same principles. Step onto the Schengen-era suspension span at Hamburg, and the walkway flexes with a gentle spring. The buried descendant of wool-stuffed keel joints, perfected by Vinland settlers, trading seal oil for copper 3 centuries before Columbus would have sailed. The Commonwealth's obsession with weather has also permeated 21st century data science. Meteorology students still honor the Veta scrolls, parchment ledgers of wind spirit observations maintained continuously since the 11th century. Those pages, digitized and fed into climate models, give Europe an unbroken weather record twice as deep as anywhere else, sharpening forecasts and earning Nordic institutes a reputation as the planet's most trusted storm prophets. Insurance firms in Jakarta price cyclone premiums on tables that cite word index 11, an actuarial algorithm named after the Norse word for fate. Culturally, the biggest surprise may be religion. The church and the thing never merged, but after 1,000 years of coexistence, they adopted each other's ceremonies. Urban cathedrals now display spiral incense braziers whose design mirrors shipboard fire pits. Meanwhile, the annual All Thing of Crafts, once a gathering of smiths, opens with a hymn composed in the minor modal patterns of Gregorian chant. It is not odd to see a cardinal bless a new fiber optic seabed line by dipping an iron hammer pendant into holy water and reciting verses that call on St. Olav and Thor in the same breath. On the darker side, Europe's collective memory of the Fimble debt crises, a series of silver shortages that rattled the Commonwealth banking houses in the 14th century, still shapes financial regulation. Modern central banks carry reserve ratios nicknamed the SAIAX buffer, referencing the broad fighting knives once used to pry silver rivets from longships to pay creditors. Whenever public debt levels flirt with the buffer, news anchors roll out black and white footage of lawmakers hammering replica rivets on the parliamentary floor, a ritual borrowed directly from medieval debt jubilees. Popular entertainment draws constant inspiration from the continuum. Streaming dramas retell the porcelain fever that swept Iberia in the mid-1000s as a boardroom thriller about patent trolls. Gamers pilot magnetic foil cargo hulls across alternate Atlantic currents mapped from the Greenland sagas. Even fashion cycles back. This year's Paris Couture Week revived the shoulder-looped wool cloak, dyed in Tyrian purple and trimmed with silk wool from Vinland mulberry orchards. Proof that a 1,000-year supply chain can still surprise. Finally, there is identity. Ask a commuter in Berlin what being European means, and odds are their answer will reference the phrase carved on the Three Crowns monument in York. Where ships meet, people meet. It is a credo that frames unity not as a treaty, but as a tide. After 10 centuries under the North Sea's restless sway, the continent defines itself by movement, of goods, of stories, of cultures, forever cresting, never at anchor. 700 words woven from the sails of history, yet still only a stitch in the vast tapestry of a world recharted by Vikings who never stopped sailing.